One sunny afternoon, a woman named Cora Tenetti watches a young couple make out publicly on a beach. The couple don't seem to care that there are several people, including children, trying to enjoy their day. They are busy exploring each other's bodies while loudly blaring out a new pop song. Moments later, Cora stands up, grabs her knife, and stabs the man in the neck. As if to make sure he is dead, Cora then stabs him several more times in the abdomen. Following this, the movie flashes back to the past. It all begins in upstate New York as a young woman named Cora Tenetti talks on the phone with a customer. She works with her husband, Mason, and his father at their family's air conditioning company. Cora also lives right next door to her in-laws, and after work, she regularly has dinner at their house. It looks like Cora has a peaceful, predictable existence on the surface, but deep down, there is something suffocating her, almost like an untreated depression. This is more than evident during the couple's regularly scheduled Friday night intercourse. Cora only participates in it because her husband likes it. In fact, she sometimes also sees a nightmarish, recurring vision during their lovemaking. She sees a gloomy wallpaper pattern, a little girl's voice saying a Hail Mary, and a spooky blonde woman in a red dress. It is then revealed that Cora grew up surrounded by religious zealots in upstate New York. One Saturday afternoon, Cora, Mason, and their toddler son Lane reach Lake Minnewaska for a relaxing day. It's a picturesque summer scene with kids running around, beer-filled coolers, and buckets perfectly sized for building sandcastles. Cora goes in for a dip, swimming beyond the buoys toward the lake's opposite shore. She then abruptly plunges below the surface as if to drown herself. After spending an alarming amount of time underwater, she hears Mason call out to her from the shore. This prompts her to pop back up to the surface, struggling for air. Once she is back on the shore, Cora absent-mindedly slices a pear with a knife. She also keenly watches on as a couple makes out sensually on a nearby blanket. The woman soon puts on a song, and she can be overheard saying that it is from her partner, Frankie's band. For some reason, Cora is disturbed by the track. It becomes very loud, and she seems to be in a trance while watching the couple make out. Suddenly, she runs over to their blanket and immediately stabs Frankie all over the body. The beach is awash with screams, and a shocked Mason runs over to the spot. He then wrestles his wife to the sand until she releases her grip on the knife. Moments later, the police arrive, and Cora is quietly led away in handcuffs. Mason, looking dazed on the back of an ambulance, turns away from his wife as she calls to him from the back of the police cruiser. Elsewhere, Detective Harry Ambrose is in an alley, spying on a waitress with binoculars. There's blue blood pooled under two of his bruised fingernails, which he presses into his thumb. By the time Ambrose is summoned to the crime scene at the lake, Cora has already confessed. Her case seems open and shut with more than enough eyewitnesses to corroborate the events. It is also revealed that her victim was a 29-year-old doctor named Frankie Belmont. With her mugshot taken and Belmont's blood swabbed from her body, Cora showers under police supervision. This triggers a memory from her childhood. Cora is saying the Hail Mary with her father, who encourages her to include her mother and her little sister in the prayers. Though it's obvious that little Cora loves her dad, she tells him she doesn't want her mom to come back. Back in the present day, Mason and his parents are shell-shocked at the events. Cora calls him from the station, but he ignores it and lets it go to voicemail. In the meantime, Ambrose and his partner also begin questioning Cora. She's been married for 3 years, and both her parents are dead. She has no history of mental illness and takes only the occasional sleeping pill. Surprisingly, Cora tells them she doesn't even want a lawyer, but the detective questions why she would kill a man that she'd never met before in her life. Cora simply replies that she killed him because they were playing irritating music. But Ambrose can't wrap his brain around this particularly brutal homicide. He also thinks that when women kill, the victim is normally someone they're intimately involved with. A few days later, Cora is transferred to the local county jail and kept alone in a cell. She is increasingly distressed and believes she hears that song from the beach blaring in her cell. She bangs on the walls and on an intercom buzzer, begging the guards for a sleeping pill. But when they refuse to help her, Cora falls to her knees and fanatically recites the Hail Mary. The following morning, Detective Ambrose appears outside the Tenetti household. He sees a throng of reporters armed with cameras and mics waiting for a soundbite. The detective makes his way inside and has a conversation with her family. Mason explains that right after the stabbing, Cora went to Frankie's wife, Leah, and comforted her. According to him, She reassured Leah that her attacker is now gone. Apparently, on some level, Cora thought she was rescuing her from being abused. Meanwhile, in her cell, Cora revisits another childhood memory. This time, it is one of her parents arguing before introducing Cora to her baby sister, Phoebe. The little child is clearly unwell, with a black and blue cast to her skin. Her mother tells Cora that when she was a baby, she took up all her strength. That is why when her little sister came, she didn't have any energy left. Now, they have to pray and do everything God says if they want to see baby Phoebe healthy. A few days later, Mason finally goes to see Cora. She immediately asks about their son, and he reveals that the boy is fine. He also apologizes for not coming to meet her earlier. However, Cora tells him that none of this is his fault and that he should move on with his life. This makes Mason emotional, and he leaves immediately without saying goodbye to his wife. On the other hand, Detective Ambrose calls his partner to tell him he's heading to see Leah Belmont. If she can confirm Cora was in some kind of delusional state, the judge won't accept a guilty plea, but Ambrose only has 2 hours before her hearing. He later finds Leah sedated at the hospital with her friend Patrick, a bystander to the murder, at her bedside. The two men sit down together in the hospital cafeteria, where the detective asks Patrick why he didn't try to stop Cora. Mason ran 15 feet to tackle her, while Patrick was barely 4 feet away. Patrick reveals that he saw Frankie grab Cora's arm after being stabbed for the first time. Frankie could have stopped Cora, but didn't, because it looked like he had recognized her. Meanwhile, at a courthouse, Cora Tenetti pleads guilty to the murder of Frankie Belmont. The judge tries to talk her out of it, as she has no criminal record and no strong motivation for the crime. Yet, she is hell-bent on forfeiting her right to a trial. Concerned by Cora's behavior, the judge orders an examination to determine her mental health. Following this, Ambrose goes to see Cora and asks why she's pleading guilty. He wants her to plead insanity and reunite with her loving family. However, Cora replies that she doesn't want that life back, which sounds like a strange answer to the detective. She, in the meantime, returns to a childhood memory in her head. In it, her parents are fighting because Mom insists on letting Cora's sick sister, Phoebe, sleep with them. So, Dad sleeps in the tiny twin bed opposite Cora. Later on, Ambrose sits down with Leah Belmont, who's looking exhausted in a hospital gown. She honestly answers that Frankie never mentioned Cora. However, she did know that he had an intense connection with a woman years before they met. Leah recalls that there was something wrong with the woman caused due to a life-changing accident. The scene then shifts to a flashback where Cora watches a circle of people saying a rosary over Phoebe. One of her aunties, Margaret, sneaks Cora a chocolate bar before she heads home to the city. Later that night, in her bedroom, Cora removes thick blankets from a box to reveal a secret treasure trove beneath them. The box contains mascara, nail polish, bracelets, a coin purse, and now a chocolate bar. Back in the present, Ambrose pushes Cora to find out if there is a history between her and Frankie. He keeps on peppering her until she tells him something, and to his surprise, Cora says she met Frankie on September 3rd. It is then revealed that 5 years ago, Cora met a guy named JD and his friend in a bar named Carl's Tap Room over the 4th of July weekend. They all took pills and drove off in his car to somebody's house. There, they spent the night together, but she only remembers the orange carpet and a song playing over and over again. 2 weeks later, Cora discovered she was pregnant, but she didn't have the stranger's number. She tried to track him down, only to find that JD was a fake name. Thanks to her Catholic upbringing, telling her parents about the pregnancy or abortion wasn't an option. Cora instead tried to end her life by stepping in front of a car, but when she woke up in the hospital, she had a fractured hip, a concussion, and no pregnancy. Detective Ambrose listens intently, but he is not convinced that this adds up. Elsewhere, Mason has a flashback of having intercourse with Cora. She freaks out when he initiates oral pleasure, smashing his head between her thighs. Back in the present day, a policewoman friend interviews Mason about the mysterious JD. He replies that she never mentioned that name, but it is obvious that he isn't being completely honest. The policewoman then tells him Cora got pregnant from a one-night stand with this JD figure. This revelation rocks Mason's world to its core. Meanwhile, Detective Ambrose digs through the evidence that was confiscated from the crime scene. He finds a mobile phone and asks his fellow cop if he knows how to play music in it. Ambrose then drives to the bar, Carl's Tap Room, while listening to Frankie's song on the phone. Soon afterwards, he reaches the bar and begins his interrogation. The bartender recognizes Cora both from a photo the detective shows her as well as from the news. She remembers Cora came on the 4th of July and had been dancing with another girl. Apparently, Cora was so intoxicated that she couldn't stand up straight. The bartender also remembers that there was a blonde-haired guy with them. Ambrose finds this a bit strange, as Frankie has jet black hair. Following this, the detective visits the home of Frankie's parents and has a conversation with them. They reveal that they had never heard their son use the nickname JD. They also refuse to believe in Cora's story. To prove their point, the father brings forward a file. It has documentation to prove that Frankie was working at a volunteer clinic in Los Angeles 5 years ago. On the other hand, Detective Leroy also has been digging into the case. To his utter surprise, he has made two strange discoveries. The first is that no hospitals in that area have any records of Cora being admitted after a car crash. The second one is that Cora has been lying to the police about her parents being dead. They're very much alive and live just half an hour away from her home. Back at the prison, Cora returns to her cell from the shower to find the mattress and bedding stripped from her bunk. This triggers a memory from her childhood. In it, her mother tends to sores on Phoebe's back while looking visibly upset. It is then revealed that she has found out that Cora took chocolate from Aunt Margaret. Mother then forces Cora to admit that Phoebe is sick because she sinned by taking the gift. Shortly afterwards, Ambrose arrives at the jail and interrogates Cora once more. He asks why she lied about her parents and the pregnancy. The detective insists he's trying to help her, but Cora rudely tells him that he is a liar. Seeing that there is no other option left, Ambrose plays Frankie's song on his phone. A visibly upset Cora insists he turns it off immediately, but the detective only increases the volume. This pushes Cora into a new version of her recurring vision, a blonde woman leading her downstairs where two people are having intercourse. Suddenly, Cora flies into a rage, beating Ambrose's chest with her fists and screaming that she'll kill him. The following day, Mason pays a visit to Cora himself. He questions why she didn't tell him about the pregnancy and why she lied to the cops about Frankie. It is then revealed that Mason knows JD. Although he has never met JD face-to-face, he has some mutual friends with this mysterious figure. After leaving the prison, Mason goes to see an old friend to ask if he remembers JD. The friend replies that JD is still around and lives not too far away. Late that night, Ambrose meets his partner, Leroy, at the police station. They are now fully aware that the song triggers Cora. They also review Ambrose's injuries and the security footage of Cora attacking him. Turns out, she struck him 7 times, in the same pattern as the 7 stab wounds that killed Frankie Belmont. In the meantime, Cora has yet another nightmare in her prison cell. She sees her son, Lane, calling out to her while dragging his blanket around the house. Just then, Cora wakes up, sweating profusely. She later calls Mason and asks him to bring Lane to see her. Surprisingly, her husband agrees without hesitation. In the meantime, Ambrose goes to see Cora's parents. Her mother, Elizabeth Lacey, is seriously ill with a nasal cannula and sores on her hands. The parents then reveal that they haven't spoken to Cora for years. Furthermore, they add that Cora ran away 5 years ago at the age of 23. Elizabeth remembers the day very well as it was around the 4th of July, which happens to be Phoebe's birthday. A month after Cora ran away, her sickly little sister passed away. It's clear Elizabeth hates her elder daughter just as much as she hated her while growing up. The detective then asks why they didn't file a missing persons report. Elizabeth coldly replies that Cora died for them when she left the house. Back at the prison, Cora is once more lost in a bad dream. A montage of quick scenes shows her nightmarish visions. A bell rings at a bar and a blonde woman whispers to a man, asking him to give Cora another pill. She adds that the pill will loosen her up. This is then followed by visions of a foot stepping on a topless woman's chest. Her sternum collapses and makes a terrible, bone-shattering sound. Right then, Cora wakes up screaming and squirming as if she is fighting some unseen attackers. The guards soon enter the cell and quickly wrestle her to the ground. They then roll up her sleeves to sedate her, only to reveal distinctive scar tissue in the crook of her arm. The following day, Ambrose arrives at the county jail to question Cora. He sees the scars on her arms and recognizes them as telltale evidence of heroin addiction. The detective then presses her to tell the truth about her scars. Eventually, she reveals that her addiction started 5 years ago before she had ever met Mason. The detective continues his questions and asks where exactly she was after leaving home. Since she was hooked up on drugs, He is sure that someone else must have been accompanying her. In response, Cora says that she doesn't remember who she was with. However, she reveals that she used to sleep around with different men for drugs back then. Cora then begs the detective not to tell this information to Mason, her in-laws, or her son. All of them think her scars are because of a childhood infection, but Ambrose says he is bound by his profession and may have to relay this information to her husband. As the detective is leaving the county jail, a policeman tells him that Cora's aunt, Margaret, had also visited her earlier. So Ambrose drives into the city and later arrives at Margaret's lovely apartment. There, the old lady says she tried to be close with Cora, but Elizabeth's rude behavior made it extremely difficult to do so. She also reveals that Cora disappeared for a while in July of 2012. She resurfaced 2 months later and lived with Margaret for a while, but the old lady also feels guilty for ignoring obvious signs of distress in Cora's behavior. Margaret then reveals that Cora had a mysterious scar on her scalp. She also regularly had nightmares right around 3 a.m. every night. In the meantime, Mason shows up to visit Cora at the prison, but without Lane. It is revealed that the detective had visited him and questioned him about Cora's drug habit. Mason is devastated that she lied to him yet again. The scene shifts to a flashback where a preteen Cora shares a bedroom with Phoebe. Unlike her sister, Phoebe doesn't hesitate to curse or even engage in reading scandalous magazines. One night, Phoebe produces a contraband women's magazine she nicked from the hospital. She then asks Cora to read her an article on foreplay. Before long, a furious Elizabeth finds the magazine. Phoebe says someone left it on the sidewalk while Cora immediately admits her guilt. As punishment, Elizabeth makes Cora kneel on dry rice and pray in front of a large crucifix. Later, Phoebe picks at her sister's skinned knees and asks why she didn't lie. Cora timidly replies that God would punish them for lying by making Phoebe sick. However, her little sister dismisses this and assures her that God isn't listening to them. That night, the girls sneak wine, crackers, and that enormous crucifix into their bedroom for a mock mass. They then lie down next to Jesus and tell him they love him. Back in the present day, Cora's assigned public defender tells her she might get parole in 30 years. Cora asks if she could change her plea. The lawyer discourages her as it is really hard to be found not guilty even on temporary insanity. On top of that, everything about her, her family, and her past will be dredged up. Elsewhere, Ambrose visits the rehabilitation center where Cora was kept for a while. There, an employee explains that she got clean easily after 2 weeks of inpatient treatment. Her head wound had been stitched up before she arrived there, and she came in wearing new, clean clothes. Unlike many of the homeless addicts they treat, a man named Caleb Walker, who left no address or number, signed her intake form. A few days pass by and Cora's second plea hearing arrives. Her parents are also seated in the front row, which only adds to her nervousness. Detective Ambrose watches on in dismay as Cora admits to her crimes. However, the detective doesn't want to let this case go just yet. He manages to track down the mysterious Caleb Walker and questions him regarding this case. Caleb simply says that he happened to spot Cora passed out on the street when he was taking out his trash. So, he changed her clothes, stitched her wound, and put her at the nearest rehab center. On the other hand, Mason meets JD at a bar and questions how he knows Cora Lacey. The latter immediately begins insulting her and even asks if she still likes to make out with 3 men at the same time. Enraged, Mason lunges at JD and the 2 men begin fighting right there in the bar. The following day, Detective Ambrose once again visits the county jail. He disguises a packet of sugar as drugs in front of Cora and asks her to demonstrate how she would administer it. Cora uncaps the needle, but she almost immediately loses steam as she has no idea what she's doing. This is just as Ambrose suspected. Addicts normally inject in their hands and feet before their arms would get scarred like Cora's. He then asks how much of the 2 months between the 4th of July and the time she got admitted to the rehab center does she remember. Cora replies that she only remembers fragments from that time. This makes it clear to the detective that someone was forcing Cora to take those drugs. Suddenly, the familiar creepy wallpaper finally comes into focus in Cora's mind. She is in a bedroom, and a man in a scrub top soon arrives. He wears a terrifying, featureless mask with 2 holes for the eyes and another for the nose and mouth. He addresses Cora with her name and asks how she is doing.